Imagine walking alone through a dense jungle trail just before dusk. The air is thick, the trees pressing close, and every sound feels amplified like the forest is watching. You take a step off the path, just one, and suddenly, you're lost. No matter which way you turn, the trees seem to shift, the trail stretches longer, and time begins to blur. Locals say this isn't just bad luck, it's the work of a tikbalang, a creature from Filipino folklore, tall as a tree, with the head of a horse and the body of a man. Mischievous, mysterious. Some say it leads travelers astray for fun. Others whisper that it's guarding something sacred or punishing those who disrespect the forest. They say if you feel like someone's watching you from the trees, it's already too late. But what if the Tikbalang isn't just a myth? What if it's a warning? In this episode, we dive into the legend, the history, and the eerie truth behind one of Southeast Asia's most unforgettable creatures. It often begins with a shortcut. You're traveling through the countryside, maybe on a motorbike, maybe walking with a friend. You see a path that looks quicker, less traveled, a bit overgrown, but nothing too intimidating. The locals warned you to stay on the main road, but you laughed it off. Just superstition, you thought. Then things start to change. You take that path, and after a few minutes, it feels like you're going in circles. The trees all look the same. The light shifts strangely. You start to sweat, not just from heat, but something deeper. A feeling that something isn't right. A shadow moves through the trees, but when you turn, there's nothing there. You call out. No one answers. The path you were just on is suddenly gone. You've entered the domain of the Tikbalang. Stories say the Tikbalang enjoys playing tricks on travelers. It can bend reality, trap people in an illusion, or make them believe they're walking for hours when they've barely moved at all. Some believe it's just a prankster spirit. Others fear it's a guardian, protecting sacred land from outsiders. Many claim to have seen it. A towering figure. Horse's head, long limbs, glowing eyes. Sometimes it rides the wind, sometimes it watches from above, perched in trees like a demon scout. And sometimes it walks silently beside you, just out of sight. Out of sight. There's a belief in the Philippines that if you ever get caught in a Tikbalang's trap, you should turn your shirt inside out. It sounds silly until someone tries it and suddenly the forest opens back up. The path appears again. You're free, but shaken. This isn't just an old campfire story. For many Filipinos, especially those in rural areas, the Tikbalang is a very real presence. It's a creature you respect, fear even, one you don't joke about lightly. It teaches a lesson that feels deeply universal. Don't take nature lightly. Don't ignore warnings. And don't assume you're alone just because you can't see anything. Because in the forests of the Philippines, the Tikbalang might be watching, and it never blinks. To understand the Tikbalang, you have to go back, way back, before colonization, before the Spanish galleons ever reached the shores of the Philippines. Long before written records, the islands were alive with stories. Animism was the core of belief. Forests, rivers, mountains, they weren't just part of the land, they were alive. Spirits dwelled in everything. The Tikbalang, according to many scholars and folklorists, is one of those ancient spirits. A diwata gone rogue, a forest guardian shaped by fear, reverence, and imagination. Some theories suggest the Tikbalang may have evolved from pre-colonial deities. It shares traits with older animistic figures: towering size, a connection to nature, a tendency to interfere with humans who disrespect the land. In many ways, it's not a monster, it's a warning, a symbol of natural balance demanding respect. Others believe the Tikbalang myth absorbed influences from Hindu, Buddhist imagery. Before Christianity took root, Indian cultural influences reached the Philippines through trade. In Hindu epics like the Ramayana, there are beings with human bodies and animal heads, often powerful, often divine. Could these stories have fused with native beliefs to birth the Tikbalang's hybrid form? And then came the Spanish. When colonizers arrived in the 1500s, they brought Catholicism and a new way of categorizing myths. Spirits once seen as protectors or tricksters were suddenly labeled as demons. The Tikbalang, with its half-beast form, was easy to villainize. Church sermons painted it as a devil figure, a creature sent to test the faithful, and over time that image stuck. Yet, in many rural communities, especially in Luzon and the Visayas, the Tikbalang remained more complex. Farmers left offerings at the base of trees. Elders told children to ask permission before entering a forest, not out of superstition, but out of deep respect. The Tikbalang was never just a scare story. It was, and still is, a reflection of how people view nature, outsiders, and the unknown, a fusion of old gods and colonial fears, a myth that carries the weight of centuries. And like all the best myths, it has changed with the people who tell it. So how do you know you've crossed paths with a Tikbalang? It usually starts small, a cold gust of wind on a hot day, trees rustling without a breeze, the feeling that you're being watched. Then the signs escalate, you lose your way, the path loops, the sounds of the forest go eerily quiet, or worse, too loud. Some claim the Tikbalang can mimic human voices, calling your name from deep in the trees, luring you further away from safety. One of its favorite tricks is called panlilinlang, a kind of magical deception. It scrambles your sense of direction, making you walk in circles, even on familiar roads. Some people wander for hours or even days, only to find themselves back at the same tree over and over again. But this isn't random. Folk wisdom says the Tikbalang doesn't target just anyone. It chooses people who disrespect nature, those who laugh too loudly in the woods, who urinate near old trees, who ignore warnings from locals. It's not just a trickster, it's a judge. Still, not all encounters end badly. There are ways to protect yourself. One of the most famous is turning your shirt inside out. Strange as it sounds, it's said to break the Tikbalang's illusion. Some believe it confuses the spirit, while others say it's a sign of humility, like admitting your mistake to the forest itself. Another method, ask permission before entering unfamiliar land. In many Filipino communities, people whisper, tabi-tabi po, a respectful way of saying, "Excuse me, spirit, I'm just passing through." It might sound superstitious, but for those who've been caught in a Tikbalang's maze, it's a habit they never break. There are even stories of people taming a Tikbalang. Legends say if you manage to grab the 3 thick hairs from its mane, the creature becomes your servant for life. But no one agrees on how or if that's even possible. Most don't live to try. What's clear is this: the Tikbalang isn't mindless. It chooses. It waits. It punishes arrogance, but respects humility. And sometimes, just sometimes, it lets you go. Not because it has to, but because it wants to. And that's what makes it terrifying. The Tikbalang is more than a monster lurking in the forest. To understand its true power, we have to ask, what does it represent? At its core, the Tikbalang is a mirror. It reflects the Filipino relationship with nature, both reverent and cautious. The Philippines is a country shaped by natural forces: typhoons, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, dense jungles, endless coastlines. Nature is beautiful, yes, but also unpredictable, untamable, and at times merciless. The Tikbalang embodies that duality. It's not evil, it's wild, mysterious. It's the voice of the forest saying, "This land is not yours to conquer." In many rural communities, the Tikbalang also serves as a moral compass. It punishes arrogance, greed, and disrespect. It rewards humility and reverence. That's why farmers leave offerings at the base of trees, why elders tell children not to shout or laugh too loudly near rivers. These aren't just old superstitions. They're woven moral lessons, passed through generations. There's also something deeply symbolic about its form: a human body with the head of a horse, something familiar yet unnatural. The horse itself wasn't native to the Philippines until the arrival of Spanish colonizers. Some scholars believe this fusion reflects the tension between native identity and foreign influence, between ancient beliefs and new imposed systems. The Tikbalang stands at that crossroads. It's part guardian, part ghost of colonial trauma. A myth that adapted but never disappeared. And perhaps most haunting of all, the Tikbalang is a keeper of stories. It lives in whispered warnings, in the lessons of elders, in that moment when someone hesitates before stepping off the trail. It reminds people that not everything should be mapped or tamed, that sometimes getting lost isn't just physical, it's spiritual. In a world that increasingly pushes for progress, speed, and domination of nature, the Tikbalang lingers like a question. What have we forgotten in our race forward? What spirits, what wisdom have we left behind? Because sometimes the monsters in the woods are there, not to frighten us, but to make us stop, listen, and remember. Like all powerful myths, the Tikbalang hasn't stayed frozen in time. It has shifted, transformed, and adapted, just like the people who tell its stories. Before colonization, the Tikbalang was a forest spirit, unpredictable but respected. It lived in the margins, guarding sacred spaces. But when Spanish colonizers arrived in the 16th century, everything changed. Under Catholic influence, spirits that once commanded reverence were rebranded as demons. The Tikbalang, with its inhuman form and wild nature, was cast as a devil, a threat to Christian order, a creature to fear, not to understand. That image stuck for generations. It became the boogeyman in bedtime stories, the dark figure waiting at the edge of the road. Parents used it to keep kids indoors after dark. But even as Christianity spread, the Tikbalang survived, not because it was allowed, but because it was needed. It stayed in the shadows of culture where real fears lived, fears of getting lost, of the unknown, of crossing boundaries you shouldn't. Then came a new evolution, pop culture. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the Tikbalang found new life in comic books, movies, and animation. Shows like Tress, a Filipino graphic novel turned Netflix series, reintroduced the Tikbalang as more than just a monster. In Tressie, they appear as sleek, towering enforcers of supernatural order, mysterious but not evil. This reimagining gave the Tikbalang agency, complexity, even honor. It became a symbol of Filipino myth, reclaiming its voice. And the reinterpretations didn't stop there. Artists began painting Tikbalangs in surreal dreamscapes. Writers turned them into tragic figures, lonely guardians forgotten by modern life. TikTok creators told spooky Tikbalang stories with eerie filters and jump scares. The creature has become Folklore 2.0, reborn in hashtags, memes, and urban legends online. This transformation mirrors the Filipino experience itself, adapting through colonization, diaspora, and modernization, yet never losing its roots. The Tikbalang is no longer just a trickster spirit in the woods. It's a cultural survivor. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful. The fact that something born from jungle whispers can still walk beside us in the digital age, shape-shifting, re-emerging, refusing to be forgotten. Because some stories don't fade, they evolve. And in doing so, they become even harder to escape. So, where did the Tikbalang come from? Is it really a supernatural guardian lurking in the jungle? Or is there something more grounded, even scientific, behind the myth? Let's start with the forests themselves. Dense, humid, and often disorienting, Philippine jungles are unlike anything most travelers experience. The terrain is wild, the paths are winding, and the line between natural sound and imagined noise blurs fast, especially when you're alone. It doesn't take a spirit to make you feel lost. The forest can do that all on its own. Some researchers suggest that the Tikbalang legend may have formed around these very sensations. The phenomenon of getting turned around in the woods is well documented. Psychologists call it spatial disorientation. When your internal compass falters, even familiar places feel foreign. The longer you panic, the worse it gets. People walk in circles, swear they've seen the same tree 3 times, even hear things that aren't there. Sound familiar? But others think the myth may have a more visual origin. Horses were introduced to the Philippines during Spanish colonization, and to villagers seeing them for the first time, they would have seemed otherworldly, tall, muscular, loud, unlike any local creature. It's possible that early sightings of horses in the misty hills sparked strange, exaggerated stories that grew over time into tales of horse-headed beings. Still, there's more. Anthropologists argue that creatures like the Tikbalang don't need to be real in order to be meaningful. They serve as protectors, not of land but of memory. They preserve traditional values, remind people to be humble, respectful, cautious. They hold communities together through shared fear and wonder. And there's a psychological angle too. Carl Jung believed in archetypes, recurring symbols that appear in myths around the world. The Tikbalang, with its animal-human form and forest domain, could be an expression of the wild guardian archetype. It's not just a Filipino idea, it's a primal one. So, is the Tikbalang real? Not in the way a scientist might prove, but in the minds of those who grew up with the stories, in the rustling of leaves, the sudden silence in the trees, the shiver on the back of your neck. It's real enough, and maybe that's what matters most. The Tikbalang is more than just a creature from old stories. It's a living myth, one that's followed generations from the forest floor to the glow of smartphone screens. In a way, that's the real magic of the Tikbalang. It never needed to be seen to be believed. It survives not through proof, but through presence. Always just out of sight, just out of reach. It lives in the hesitation before you enter the woods, in the chill that creeps over your skin when the trail feels too quiet, in the whispered tabi tabi po before stepping over a fallen tree. And maybe that's why it still haunts us. Because the Tikbalang is a reminder that some places deserve reverence, that not everything should be conquered or explained, that getting lost isn't always a failure, it's a return to something older, something sacred. It also speaks to something deeply human, our need for stories that make the world feel alive. Whether as guardian, trickster, or judge, the Tikbalang challenges our arrogance. It warns us not to forget the land, not to forget ourselves. Even today, in a world lit by GPS and satellites, people still get lost, still hear footsteps behind them, still feel like the forest is watching. And who's to say it isn't? So the next time you're walking a lonely trail and the wind shifts and the silence grows too deep, maybe don't run, maybe stop, listen, because some legends don't fade, they wait. And if the Tikbalang is out there, watching from the shadows, it's not to scare you, it's to remind you that you were never alone. Enjoyed the journey into the forest with us? If this story gave you chills, made you think, or reminded you of a tale from your own culture, don't forget to like the video, share it with a fellow myth lover, and hit subscribe for more creatures that walk the edge of history and legend. What do you believe the Tikbalang really is? A spirit? A symbol? Or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're watching just like the Tikbalang.